All right, I will say good morning, a good voch. Zchus, Baruch Hashem, to begin another week of Maseches Bava Kama together. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors. To thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsor for the month of Shvat, Mrs. Selma Woolf, for dedicating over Shiurim and Drushos this month with immense gratitude for the refuos from Hashem, in the merit of a refuah for all of those in need, in the zchus of our brave soldiers, and in the zchus of the return of our hostages. Our week of learning sponsors for today, Saeed and Sima Haken, in memory of Saeed's mother, Taji, Behtari, Bas Harav, Meir, Moshe, zechus, and our Daf Yomi share today is sponsored by my family in commemoration of my grandmother, zechus, yahrzeit, Freda, Bas, Moshe, Yosef. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, all of the Neshamas will have an aliya, the families in Neshama. And of course, we dedicate Maseches Bava Kama Le'ilui Nishmas, Master Sergeant Eliyahu, Harush, Hashem Yikom Damo. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, Neshama will have an aliya and the family in Neshama. We'll say with that, let us begin. We have a really exciting daf. Ahead of us today. Baruch Hashem, with your permission, without your permission also. We're actually going to start from the Mishnah. We're going to start from the Mishnah on Ayin Tesima base 79b, so that we get the full flavor of this entire sugya together. A really fascinating sugya that is going to contain incredible agarata, hashkafa, and some really fascinating halacha. The halacha, I don't know that we'll get to today. The halacha we might end up really focusing on in tomorrow's daf a little bit more. But let's begin the sugya. Says the Mishnah, you cannot raise small animals in Eretz Yisrael. Now, we'll say, what is this? What is this idea? So it says the Gemara, so it says Rashi. Rashi says, Ein megalim behema daka b'Eretz Yisrael, mishum yishuv Eretz Yisrael, shemavir es hasados, v'chol sados Eretz Yisrael, staman di Yisrael. We'll say the problem with small animals is that they wander around and they graze. And they graze not specifically, but they graze on other people's property. So remember again, in Eretz Yisrael, you're talking about a land where there is Jewish ownership. It's actually interesting. Rashi says over here that you come to a field in Eretz Yisrael, and the assumed ownership of a field in Eretz Yisrael is Jewish. It's Jewish. Jews own Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is for Am Yisroel. So therefore, again, Chazal made a takana, and they said that ultimately, again, you can't raise small animals in Eretz Yisrael because they essentially it becomes a destructive force, a financially destructive force for others. Aval megalim b'Surya, but you can raise small animals in Surya. Now, let's remember again. Rashi points out over here, what's Surya? Surya was the area conquered by David HaMelech, but it's what's called kibush yachid. We'll talk about this more. David HaMelech, it wasn't a milchemes mitzvah. It wasn't a mandatory war. It was an optional war. An optional war that David HaMelech decided to go ahead and wage on his own for the sake of expanding the territorial area of Eretz Yisrael, which a king is entitled to do. Kings not do, but because of that, Surya does not have Kidushas Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, again, there's no Shemitah there, there's no Shumas and Maestros there. So therefore, again, this takana doesn't apply there as well. Ubu in Barosh Eretz Yisrael, or in the forests of Eretz Yisrael, which again, I will say, makes sense, because at the end of the day, if there's forested land, then again, there's no problem having small animals, because let them graze. They could graze freely, and they're not impacting upon anyone else's property ownership. Incredible. Excuse me. Good. So the Mishnah goes right there. In Megalim Tanagolim b'Yushalayim le'akadshim. It's fascinating. You can't raise chickens in Yerushalayim because of Kachin. I feel very special. My grandmother's from the Racha. I mentioned this yesterday in the Drasha. When she survived Auschwitz. She survived a death march. An incredible woman. And they came first to New York, and then they settled ultimately in Vineland, New Jersey, where my grandfather's from the Racha became a chicken farmer. So that was their family business. So now I feel a little remiss to the Sha'im Megalim Tarnagolim. You can't raise chickens. You can do it in Vineland, but you cannot do it in Yerushalayim. Right? Now, what's the logic behind that? So Rashi points out over here, chickens are, there's a technical term for it, for animals that root around in garbage. Or not. Right? It's not scavenger. There's whatever. So anyway, chickens root. Chickens root around in the garbage. So the concern is not garbage. The concern is sheretz or nevela, that if they come back with a piece of something that conveys tumah, so the problem just is in Yerushalayim you have a lot of karbanos. You have a lot of karbanos in Yerushalayim. So because of that, you can't raise chickens because we're concerned that because like they're scavenging around, they may bring back like a shtik nevela or a shtik sheretz, something, and be metame the kodshin. Okay? V'lo kohanim beretz Yisrael mi'ataras. Suppose it's very interesting. Kohanim can't raise chickens in general. Very interesting, right? Same logic, because Kohanim are always consuming kodshin, consecrated items, and therefore, again, they can't maintain chickens. In Megadlim Chazirim B'chol Makom, so we'll say Jews are not allowed to raise pigs. Jews are not to raise pigs. Again, we'll talk about this. You can't raise a chazir anywhere, so that's not a din in Eretz Yisrael. That's a din in Jews. That's a din in Jews. So you can't go ahead. And we'll discuss why. The Gemara says, here we go. Lo yigadol adam es hakelev. Here it is, Rabbi. I just want to point out, all kidding aside, because I sometimes feel like people feel like I bring biases to things. I don't bring any biases. My job is not to offer opinions. It's just to convey information. But I just want to point out what Chazal felt. Lo yigadol adam es hakelev ela im kein haya kasher b'shalsheles. That's it, Rabbi saying. That's it. You want to have a dog, geg is unto hate, right? You want to treat it as part of the family. You want to give it a seat at the table. You want to include it in your family portraits. Whatever you want to do, that's your prerogative. Keep it on a leash. Keep it on a leash. And I want to point out, by the way, I didn't see this brought down, but I'm sure it was in the spirit of Chazal. Not one of those extendable leashes, right? Where like, you see, again, for those of us who are not enamored by four-legged creatures, I just want to point out, you see it when you see one of those people walking down and you see already that leash, they clearly invested in the 300-yard leash, right? The dog is wandering aimlessly and you're like, come on. Leash means keep it on a leash, keep it next to you, or keep it next to other people who enjoy dogs. But be considerate of the rest of humanity who doesn't. If we all liked dogs, we would all own one, right? The fact that we don't means some of us do, some of us don't. Those of you who do, keep it on a leash, and keep it next to you. Good, thank you. Like I said, not me, just the Mishnah. So the ein person Yeshuvim Leonim was another interesting case. You can't go ahead. I don't have any strong feelings about doves, right? Dove ownership, I'm happy for anyone. You can't go ahead and spread out traps for doves. So we'll talk about this. The issue with dove traps is, remember we saw this a lot in our Erevin days about the shovach, a dove coat. So remember again, I could own doves, but by definition, doves fly around. So one of the interesting parts about dove traps is you just have to make sure to put out your traps that they're not trapping someone else's personally owned doves. So you could trap, I guess, like I read it, like wild doves, but ultimately, again, have to distance it from habitation 30 ris in order to go ahead and avoid catching other people's doves. Okay, so we'll say let's analyze all of this. Really interesting, a lot of very interesting Gemara. Tan Rabbanon in Megalim Behim Adaka Beretz Yisrael, Megalim Bacharshin Sheberetz Yisrael. So we'll say, so you're not allowed to raise small animals in Eretz Yisrael, but you can go ahead and raise them in the Charshin. Rashi Charshin are forests. Remember again, the whole issue with small animals is that they graze and they wander and they graze. That's the concern over here. So therefore, again, if you live in a forested area, that's not a problem. The Surya Filabiyisha, first wild animals on the bottom. In Surya, you could raise small animals even in inhabited areas. Because remember, again, in Surya, Chazal never made the takana. And all the more so in Chutz La'aretz, not a problem. Tanya Idach was another brayso. In Megala Behim Adaka Beretz Yisrael, you can't raise small animals in Eretz Yisrael. Avamakavin b'midbar shebi Yehuda, you can raise them in the desert, midbar Yehuda, or b'midbar shebesar Akko, or by the desert by the border of Akko. V'yachal bisha amru in megadlin behema dako, aval megadlin behema gasa. Then I will say, now here's what's interesting about this, right? I understand the takana. right? What's the takana? We're concerned that people have animals, and what do animals do? Animals, they wander and they graze. So we'll say, when you read this Mishnah, it makes it sound like the only animals that wander and graze are behemadakas, right? Like a little sheep, right? But behemagasa don't. But that's not true, right? Cows graze also. So why isn't the takana extend to a behemagasa? The Gemara says it's very simple. Lefi shein goes in gzera al tzibor, elaim kain rov hatzibor yicholim lamod bo. Shabbos says it's very interesting. Chazal only make a takana if the majority of the tzibor are able to go ahead and uphold the takana. If the takana itself becomes something that is impossible for the majority of the tzibor to withstand, so Chazal don't insist. It's interesting. The Gemara says, "Behema daka efshel lahavi mechutz laaretz." You don't have to raise a behema daka in Eretz Yisrael. They could import that. Behema gasa efshel lahavi mechutz laaretz. I will say, so it's actually interesting. So even if you can't raise a behema daka in Eretz Yisrael, you could import it. Behema gasa is much more complicated. As the Gemara says, it's impossible. It's not impossible. It just would be incredibly difficult. So therefore, Chazal. So what's interesting about this is as follows. It almost sounds like what the Gemara is saying is like, in the perfect world, you wouldn't raise animals in Eretz Yisrael so as not to encroach on other people's property. Okay, the Gemara says that's not possible. That's not possible. Like there has to be a livestock option within Eretz Yisrael. So behema daka, which you can more easily import that. Behema gasa, which you cannot, you could raise in Eretz Yisrael. Incredible. So the Meir goes weiter. Even though we said you can't raise a behema daka in Eretz Yisrael, avamashu kodem l'regal shloshim yom, the kodem nishte beno lamid yom, ubilvad shelo yisha as achrona shloshim yom. So it's very interesting. Even though they said you can't raise a behema daka, you could essentially, I will say, you could purchase a behema daka and maintain it for up to 30 days. Now, this was important prior to Yom Tiv, right? And people wanted meat, right? Or, again, this was important. Again, person had a life cycle event that they wanted to, really, it sounds like for consumption purposes was the big thing. So you could import a behema daka, and you can hold it up to 30 days. So the Gemara says, however, this is provided provided that you do not go ahead and extend it past the needed purpose for 30 days. Now, what does that mean? Watch this. You would have thought the nafik le regel umechizabna ad hashta akanti lo malo lo tlasin yomin lo nema tlasin yomin mishra shari le l'shahuye ela kevan de nafik le regel lo mi boy le l'shahuye. So this is actually very interesting. Let's say, for argument's sake, a sukkis is coming, and I want to have lamb chops for sukkis. I purchase a sheep, right, a small little lamb, right, and what happens? And now, let's say for whatever the reason, there's enough food. I didn't need a lamb. So let's say for argument's sake, I bought it, a week before sukkis. So there's the week before sukkis, the week of sukkis. So technically speaking, I still have another 2.5 weeks till my 30 days. The Gemara says, no, that's not the way it works. In other words, you have up to 30 days to use it for the intended purpose. But once Yom Tiv is over, for example, you can no longer maintain that animal. So either shecht it and eat it, or sell it and get rid of it. Okay, interesting. Top of pay. V'atabach lokeach v'shochet, we'll say 80a. V'atabach lokeach v'shochet, lokeach v'shoheh, so Rabbi says, so another interesting halacha. What about a butcher? So a butcher, obviously, again, is permitted to go ahead and purchase a behema daka, and he can even hold it a little bit, as long as what? Rashi says, Lo yisha osa li'achar yomashuk lahashlim shloshim lemekha. So both say, essentially what the Gemara is saying is like this. When would a butcher buy animals? When do you buy animals? You buy animals corresponding to the market days. So the idea is the butcher could go ahead and purchase the behema daka, slaughter it, use it for the market day, but after the market day, he really can't hold on to it anymore. So in other words, what we don't, same idea by Yom Tiv. In other words, You can buy the behema daka, use it for Yom Tov, but once Yom Tov is over, you got to get rid of it. Either slaughter it and eat it, or sell it and get rid of it. Same thing with the butcher. You could buy it and slaughter it prior to the market days. Once the market day passes, you need to really divest yourself of that ownership. Okay, incredible. Shalut Hamidim es Rabbi Gamliel. The students asked Rabbi Gamliel, Ma'u legado. So what's the ask Rabbi Gamliel? Are you permitted to go ahead and raise a behema daka in Eretz Yisrael? Amar lahem, mutter. Gamliel says, yes, it's mutter. I v'hatnan ein megadlin. But Rebbe, we learned in Mishnah that you're not allowed to raise a behema daka in Eretz Yisrael. So I pay Amud Aleph 80a, 4 lines in. Elalav hachi kaba'o minei. Rather, this must have been the question they were asking. Mahu lishos. The question was, the question is, halacha l'maisa, if you purchase the behema daka for a particular purpose, are you permitted to hold on to it? Amar lahen mutter. And to which Rabbi Gamliel responded, yes. If you purchased it for a permitted purpose, ultimately, again, you're permitted to go ahead and retain it. Obilvad shelo teitze v'tira. As long as what? As long as you do not go ahead and allow it to go out and graze be'eder, elakosha bekare hamita. Rather, what should you do? You should go ahead and tie it to your bedpost. I will say, just point out how incredibly beautiful this is. I mean, I don't know that the act of tying an animal to your bedpost is beautiful, but the incredible connection to the past week's Parshas Bo, right? That, again, remember, Rashi HaKadosh points out that what happened over here, one of the unique distinctions between Pesach Mitzrayim and Pesach Doros, the first Pesach and subsequent Yomim Tovim of Pesach, was that Pesach Mitzrayim Mikcho Ba'asar. You purchased the Paschal Lamb on the 10th of Nisan. That's not a din by the rest. By in the future, you purchase Korban Pesach whenever you want. You just have to shecht it on Erev Yom Tov. So what did they do with it when they purchased it on the 10th of Nisan? So the Gemara Maseches brings down Kashro Bekari Hamita. They tied the lamb to their bedpost. Right? The idea now by Mitzrayim, it was the whole idea is that, remember, the Pesach, Korban Pesach was there to assert theological superiority over the Egyptians. The Egyptians worshipped the sheep, in addition to many other things. So the idea is just a beautiful, beautiful imagery. Rabbi Gamliel says, if you go ahead and you purchase a behema daka in a permitted fashion, you could retain it, but it's got to remain in your house. It's interesting. You can't allow it out to graze because we're concerned that if you do so, what's going to happen? Ultimately, it's going to graze on other people's property. Incredible. I will say a fascinating story. Tan Rabbanon. Maise b'chasid echad. There was a story with a chasid. Shaya gonach milibo. Now, we'll say gonach milibo means he was ill. Which now gonach means he was like groaning. Right? So in other words, he was sick. Now, whether that means, actually interesting, sometimes gonach malibo means he suffered from a heart ailment, right, or something. Okay, sha'alu l'rofim. He asked the doctors, what is the remedy? Va'amru lo, they said to him, ein lo takana at shiyonik chalav roseach mishachris l'shachris. So they said to him, here's the remedy. You have to drink hot milk directly from the goat, directly from the sheep, every single day. Right? That's it. So this is mamish like from the udder. Right? You have to drink milk like this. Again, hot milk every single morning. Right? So we'll say, so now, obviously, in order to do this, what do you need? You need a goat. I don't know. It might be better just to suffer through whatever this ailment is. I don't know. It's like, I'm not so sure it's such a good idea. But in any event, the Gemara says, V'heviyalo eiz. They brought him a goat, v'kashalo b'kari amita, and they tied it to the bedpost. V'hayonek mimeno shachris l'shachris. And again, he drank from the goat, literally every morning. L'yomim nichnusu chavera levakro. One day his friends came in to go ahead and do bikur cholim with him. Kevan shero osaiz kshura b'kari amita. Now his friends walked into his house. Again, remember I was saying, this guy is introduced us as a chassid. So his friends must have been other chassidim as well. They came in to go ahead and do bikur cholim. They saw the goat tied to the bedpost. Chazru l'acharehem. They were startled. Va'amru listim mizuyin bebeso shel zeh. Va'anu nichnasin etzlo. So we'll say it's incredible. They said, this guy who we thought was so righteous, he has thieves in his home. They refer to the goat as a thief. Why do they refer to the goat as a thief? Because like we saw before, what do goats do? They go and they graze in other people's fields. So his rabbinic colleagues were very taken aback that he was maintaining a behema daka within his home. So the Gemara says, now here's what's interesting. What's interesting to note is, even though the goat was tied to the bed, right? The goat was tied to the bed. Nevertheless, they still felt that this was in violation of the takon of Chazal. Chazal felt that at the end of the day, you're not allowed to have a behema daka. Now, I just want to point out over here, this guy obviously had someone to rely on, because Rabbi Gamliel was the one who said that if you have a permit, right? If you have a goat permit, right? You could go ahead and keep your goat, but what? You got to keep it tied to the bed. So apparently, Rabbi Gamliel's position was not widely accepted. Apparently, everyone else felt that there's no goat permit, right? You just can't, or you can have it, but you need to slaughter it. You can't maintain it like this. So they were very taken aback. And obviously, this must have not been a case of sakanas nefashos, right? Because if it was sakanas nefashos, of course you could have a goat, right? If that's what it was, right? So it must have been the guy was ill. The guy was ill, but apparently, again, his rabbinic colleagues did not feel that the level of illness warranted having a behema daka. Listen to how the Gemara ends. So the Gemara says, "Yashvu ubatku v'lo matzu bo ela osa avon shel osa ha'ez." So I'll say this is actually a fascinating Gemara. So his friends apparently went ahead and did an inventory of the chassid's deeds. I'm not exactly sure how you do this, but somehow they did this, and they found that their friend, the chassid, this was his only avera. This is his only avera. Va'afu b'shas misoso, so to the chassid at the time of his death, Amar Yodea ani she'ein bi avon ela avon osait. Sha'avarti ad divrei chaverai. Says Rabbi Moshe, when the chassid died, he too took inventory. He too took inventory, ultimately again, of his own life, and he found the only avera he had. Rabbi say, if you look at the lashon over here, is she'ein bi avon ela avon osaiz. The only avera I have is the avera of this goat. Rabbi say, there's a number of incredible things that come out of here. So Rabbi say, number one, I would say is that halacha l'maisa is good to have friends. We saw this in Bnei Machshava Tova, that it's good to have friends, ultimately again, who you could be open and honest with. And ultimately again, you could share everything with, because by being able to divulge the details of your life to someone else, like a life chavrusa, it keeps you honest, right? If you know that you have to divulge everything, to someone else, so Lamais, it keeps you on a particular derech. That's number one. Number two, so this chassid obviously had those kind of friends. Number two, everyone commits averos, right? If you notice, again, this guy was a chassid. To get the title chassid in the Gemara is a big thing. But even the chassid had an avera. We'll say number three, how could it be that his only avera was the goat? How could it be? So we'll say, so remember, if you look at the lashon over here, he says at the time of his death, Amar Yodea ani she'ein bi avon ela avon osai. He says, right now, the only avera I have, we'll say, doesn't mean he didn't commit other averos. It doesn't mean he didn't. In other words, what is he saying? The only outstanding avera I have. In other words, we'll say, this chassid probably committed a lot of averos, because everybody commits a lot of averos. So what does he mean? This is the only avera B that I have right now. He did tshuva. In other words, we'll say, what makes a chassid a chassid? What makes a chassid is not that he doesn't perform averos. It's that when he performs averos, we'll say, he cleans up the mess. You see, for most of us, what ends up happening is that we make mistakes, we make a mess, and then what happens? Either we just move on and leave the mess where it is, or we take the mess and we simply sweep it under some rug, or we just look away from the mess and pretend that it doesn't exist. So the mess is still there. So this mess is here, this mess is here, this mess is here. A chassid also makes messes, right? The chassid also makes mistakes. The difference is that when a chassid makes a mess, he acknowledges it, he owns it, he cleans it up, and then he moves on. What the chassid was saying was, at this time of my death, I have one outstanding avera. Doesn't mean it was the only avera he did. Plenty of averas he did. But all of my other averas, I did tshuva for. I rectified it. I took care of it. I cleaned up my mess. The only outstanding issue I have in my life is this goat. You know, say, what an incredible Moshe for us. We all make mistakes. Find the courage to acknowledge your mess, identify your mess, clean up the mess, and then ultimately again move on. Incredible, incredible. Let's go back there. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel says as follows: My father was from the Balabatim of the Upper Galil. Why was the Upper Galil destroyed? Why was it destroyed? Because they allowed their animals, their behemadakas, to graze in the forest. And they would adjudicate financial cases with the one judge without a beis din. So the Gemara says, now 1 second. We said before that you're allowed to have a behemadaka if you live by a forest, because then the animals could just graze uninterrupted without impeding on anyone else. What's going on over here? There was, we'll say, between, so here you have Rabbi Shmuel saying between his family's home and the forest, there was another small field. So what ended up happening? So while there was a forest in proximity, in order to access the forest, the sheep had to go ahead and go across a small field where they would go ahead and graze on someone else's property. Incredible. So Rosh Hashanah said this is a fantastic Gemara. Rosh Hashanah. So we'll say, now watch this. Let's say a guy was a shepherd and he was raising behemadakas. He was raising small animals. So he's got flocks and flocks of small animals. Now what happens? He comes to Daf Yomi, learns the Mishnah on Ayin Tasima Beis, and realizes, oh my gosh, I'm in violation. I want to be about tshuva. I want to do tshuva. So we'll say, so now what's the problem? Listen, I want to be about tshuva, but I have a flock. I have a whole flock. So what do you do? So the Gemara was incredible. Harush she'asa tshuva, ein mechayvin also limkar miyad. We do not make the shepherd sell off his entire flock at once. We'll say, why? If you make him sell off his entire flock at once, what's going to happen? So first of all, he's going to end up selling it at a discount. And we'll say, what's really going to happen? He's not going to do tshuva. Why? Chazal understood. We'll say, people are good. And people are willing to do the right thing. As long as what? As long as it's not complicated. In other words, if doing the right thing is easy, 9 out of 10 people will do it. If it's complicated, 7 out of 10 won't do it. Right? 7 out of 10 won't do it. That's just human nature. So they always say, this is so profound. And Chazal, but you know what the beauty of Yiddishkeit is? The real beauty of Yiddishkeit is that Dracha Darchei Noah. So the Torah is pleasant. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't force us to defy human nature. He asks us just to kind of like massage it out. Right? He asks us just to simply become the best version of ourselves, working through our humanity. It's the beautiful vart of the Kaskar. The Kaskar says, Va'anshe Kodesh ti yunli. So the Kaskar says, Anshe Kodesh means be holy people. Kaskar says, Kadosh Baruch Hu says, Malachim, I have plenty of Malachim. I don't need any more angels. I'm surrounded by them all the time. Enough of them. Right? I don't need you to be angels. You know what I need you to be? Anshe Kodesh. I need you to be holy people. So therefore, Chazal understood this. So therefore, the shepherd wants to do tshuva. What do? He says, Ela mocher al yad. Rather, sell them off a little bit at a time. Sell off or you got to get rid of the flock. You got to get rid of the flock because you can't raise a behemadaka. But sell them off a little bit at a time. V'chein ger shenaflo klavim v'chaziram yusha. So too if a ger ultimately again. So remember again. We'll say let's say you have a ger. Obviously his father is not Jewish if he's a ger, right? So his father died and his father left him in Yerusha dogs and pigs, right? So chaziram and klavim. So we'll say, so a Jew's not supposed to own any of those things. Now the dog's case, maybe it's talking about a case of like a kelevra, like a vicious dog, where that's that you're not allowed to own. Whatever the mitzias is, right? So too again now, the ger inherited this property. So what is he supposed to do with it? So the Gemara says, in the chayvin also lim karmiyad, we don't make him sell it off all at once. Ella mocher al yad. Rather, Rabbi say he sells it off a little bit at a time. A little bit at a time. And Rabbi say, so there's two things over here that's happening, and I just want to point out how profound this is. So Rabbi say this notion of selling it off a little bit at a time. But I think just a moment. Let's analyze this for the shepherd perspective, right? We've got Ruvain. Ruvain's a shepherd, right? Now, whether Ruvain did know or didn't know, but Ruvain's been raising flocks of behemadakas, right? He's the behemadakas guy, right? And he's got flocks and flocks of behemadakas. Now he wants to become a Baal Tshuva. So now here's what's fascinating. So now I don't know. I would have thought, you want to be a Baal Tshuva? What do you do? What do you do? Sell the whole thing off, and that's it. It's a loss. It's a loss. That's not what the halacha says. The halacha says, sell it off a little bit at a time. They both say, just play this out for just a second. This to me is so riveting. So it's now Sunday. Reuven decides wants to be a Baal Tshuva. He owns 500 sheep. So now he's going to say, okay, so the most I could sell it off with at a time is 1 million of sheep at a time. So 10 sheep at a time. So we'll say he goes to the marketplace on Monday. He sells off 10 sheep. Fantastic. He'll say, what is Reuven's spiritual state on Monday? What's his spiritual state? So we'll say, see, here's what's interesting. Reuven in that moment, he's not a Baal Tshuva. Right? He's a person in the process. Remember again, I will say, a Baal Tshuva is a statement that is a title given to someone who is undergoing the process. That's why if you look at the Lashon, so Roeh Sha'asa Tshuva. He's doing Tshuva. He's not a Baal Tshuva, but he's doing Tshuva. Now I'll say, what do you see about Tshuva, which is the most incredible thing? Tshuva is a process that allows you to still be living in a state of sin as long as you're actively working through it. So I will say there are times in life where I have an issue that I know I'm going to remedy. But I can't fully remedy it now. It's going to take time, but I acknowledge it. So I will say, we all have moments like this where I know I'm doing something wrong. I know it. We're talking about after you've finished spending years explaining to yourself why it's not wrong. Now, in that moment of clarity, it's wrong. There are things that I'm doing. There are things in my life that I know that are in a state of disrepair. I acknowledge it. I own it. I also know I can't fully fix it right now. I just can't fully fix it right now. But I'll say the incredible part is, as I'm going through the process of fixing it, I'm still living in a state of sin. Isn't that incredible? I'm still living in a state of sin. But as long as I'm actively working through it, that process is still called tshuva. I'm engaged in the process of tshuva. I become a Baal Tshuva when I finish the process, but at the end of the day, I'm still working through the process of tshuva. So say, we think by definition, if I'm in a state of disrepair, then that's not tshuva. It's not true. Again, that's the shepherd case. The guy, Reuven's got a lot of sheep. It's going to take him a while to go ahead and get rid of this flock. But as long as he is working through it, we'll say, as long as I'm working the program, I'm working the tshuva program, I am still living in sin. I got it. But you're working through it. That's called tshuva. Which I will say, sometimes we are afraid to tackle things because we think to ourselves, if I can't fully resolve it, then ultimately, again, that's not called tshuva. And that's not true. What you see from this Gemara is, even if you can't fully resolve a problem, but you're at least willing to acknowledge and begin to work through it in some way, that's called tshuva. Reuven doesn't have to sell off the whole flock. A little bit today, a little bit next week, a little bit the week after. He may still have behemadakas for who knows how long. But as long as he's engaged in the process of trying to change his circumstances, that's called tshuva. Incredible. Mishnah likach bayis, likach isha be'eretz Yisrael. What's an interesting case here? Somebody took a neder to purchase a home and to marry a woman in Eretz Yisrael. So we'll say, also likach miyad, ela achi motze es halgen eslo. So we'll say, so now an interesting case. So you might have thought a guy made a neder that he wants to buy a home in Eretz Yisrael. He wants to marry an Israeli woman. So you know what? The first person he meets, he's online for shawarma, whatever. There's a nice lady in front of him, right? Okay, that's it. It's bashert. Or he finds a home. Okay, that's the first one I have to buy. The halacha is no. You have time to go ahead and identify the one that is right for you, both the home and the woman. I just want to point out what is exactly that's going on over here. So I'll say, so remember again, when it comes to a neder, there's a kind of, we saw this back in our neder days, there's a concept ultimately again about ta'acher, don't delay. Don't delay. So therefore one might have thought that since one made the neder, come on, chit-chat. No. Obviously, we're talking about matters of great importance. Therefore, again, you have the ability to go ahead and fulfill it in the right way. Interesting case here. So, listen to this. There was a story of a woman whose son was giving her a very hard time. Now, apparently, this woman was single. I don't know, divorced, husband passed away, whatever the Metzias was. So, let's say this woman, I guess, was so desperate. I don't know if she was desperate to get away from her kid, or she was desperate maybe to have a male figure in the house to help her with discipline. I don't know what the situation was, but Lamaisa, she said, I swear, right? I make a neder that I swear that whoever comes and proposes to me, I'm going to accept his proposal. So there's some guys who heard about this and answered the call, and they weren't exactly again men of the highest caliber. So now, of course, she feels like, oh my gosh, what did I do? No, what she really meant is, if Mr. Right came along and proposed to me, I would not refuse. I would not refuse that proposal, but that's not you. Right? That's what she was pointing to the guys who came to her. Okay. Kashem sha'amru, ein megalin be'madaka, kach amru ein megalin chayedaka. But say the same way that you can't go ahead and raise small animals, domesticated animals, you also can't raise small chayas. Same idea. Rabbi Shmuel will say, first white line, Rabbi Shmuel will say, megalin kalavim kufrin, v'chatulin, v'kofin, v'choldos sineim, mipnei shasuyim l'nakiras habayis. So Rabbi Shmuel says that you could raise all of these other animals. Why? What's interesting is these animals, apparently the lashon is nakiras habayis. Nakiras habayis means these animals, like they run after insects and they run after mice, so they clean up the house. My chuldos sinam. Both say, what's a chuldos sinam? Am Rav Yehuda shirtza charza, some type of sheretz that digs. Vige da amri charza. Others say some type of sheretz that stings. Vikatini sake viraya bene vardine. It has short legs and it grazes or whatever, eats in between the bushes. Umay shirtza. What's the shirtza? Timisasi sake. It has short legs. Am Rav Yehuda Rav. Asinu atzminu bebavel keretz Yisrael behema daka. So we'll say Rav Yehuda said the name of Rav that in Bavel is actually very interesting. In Bavel, they conducted themselves like Eretz Yisrael when it comes to behema daka. So we'll say the same way that you don't raise a behema daka in Eretz Yisrael, they also stopped raising behema daka in Bavel. So this is what we'll say. Shavad Barav said to Rav Huna, "No, what about your behema daka? Amrale Vidan Kaminterale Chova." He said, don't worry about our behemadaka, my wife Chova watches over it. Okay, so this is what we'll say. Amrale Chova Tikbarinhu Libina. Wow, so we'll say pretty intense over here. Shavad Bar Ava said, Chova should bury her sons. In other words, we'll say that ultimately, again, he cursed Chova, or really he cursed Rav Huna. Ultimately, again, in other words, we'll say this idea that if Chazal said something, don't go ahead and maintain a behemah daka. Don't give me this idea that you go ahead and you guard your behemah daka. In other words, we'll say, in general, you see this severity associated with people who flagrantly violate rabbinic law. Remember again, I will say, flagrant violation of rabbinic law leads ultimately to the fundamental erosion of the halachic system. So therefore, you see often like these very strong reactions to flagrant violation of rabbinic law. Kulushan diravad barava lo akaim zar l'rafuna mechov. And I will say, Rahman al-San, unfortunately, all the days Ravad Barava was alive, Rav Huna's male children from Chova did not survive. Ike da Amri Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. Rav Huna said the name of Rav. Asinu atzminu bebavel ke'eretz Yisrael behemah daka. We made ourselves ultimately again in Bavel like Eretz Yisrael for behemah daka. Michi aser Rav leBavel. When Rav resettled in Bavel from Eretz Yisrael, so ultimately again established the yeshiva, we conducted ourselves in Bavel like Eretz Yisrael. Namely, we don't raise a behemah daka in Bavel. Rav Shmuel Ravasi. We'll say another interesting story. Rav Shmuel and Ravasi. Eklo lebe Shavua haben. Vamrilei lebe Yeshua haben. So we'll say they all went to the house of the week of the sun, or the house of the salvation of the sun. Sounds like a house of worship of something else, right? So I'll say, so now listen to this. So what this is talking about over here is a bris. It's a bris. So I'll say that's what they used to call it, because remember again, the bris takes place after a week, or the bris represents the salvation of the boy. It's very beautiful. So we'll say, so these three rabbanim were standing outside, Rav, Shmuel, and Ravasi. Rav lo ayel kamei de Shmuel. So Rav wouldn't go in before Shmuel as a sign of respect. On the days Shmuel lo ayel kamei de Ravasi, Shmuel would not go in front of Ravasi, because we will say, now watch what's happening over here. So right, and Ravasi lo ayel kamei de Rav. All right. So we'll say, so this was one of these situations of three great rabbanim at the door, and no one wants to go in first. So remember, so Rav wouldn't go in front of Shmuel. We'll see why that was in just a moment. Shmuel wouldn't go in front of Ravasi, because Ravasi was greater than Shmuel, and ultimately Ravasi wouldn't go in front of Rav, because Rav was Ravasi's Rebbe. So we'll say, we're going to see now, just the part of the story you should understand is, there was room in the doorway for two people to go in at once, but not the third. So the shaila was, who are the two? So the Gemara says, so Ravasi lo ayel kamei de Rav. So Amri, man nisrach. So who's going to stay outside? In other words, we'll say, what that meant is, who's going to be the last guy to go in? In other words, two of us could go in together. One is going to be left behind. Who's going to be the guy left behind? Nisrach Shmuel v'neisei Rav Ravasi. So maybe we'll say Shmuel should stay behind, and Rav and Ravasi will go in. Or the Gemara says, v'nisrach Rav o Ravasi. Rav milsa ba'amahu da'avile de Shmuel. Mishum hahu maisa delache adabre Rav alei. So we'll say, this is interesting. Really, the way it should have happened is Rav and Ravasi should have gone in, because they were the two greater sages. However, Rav always gave cover to Shmuel, even though Rav was a greater Talmud Chacham, because of an episode that occurred, ultimately again, where Rav cursed Shmuel. So after that episode where Rav cursed Shmuel, Rav always, as a sign of remorse and also as a sign of deference, Rav always gave cover to Shmuel, even though at the end of the day, Rav was greater than Shmuel. So we'll say, so as this whole thing was going on, so ultimately, again, as all of this was going on, a cat came along and bit off the hand of a baby. Of a child. So Nafak Rav v'darash. So we'll say, so Rav, after seeing this, Rav went out and he darshan, Chatul mutar laharga. You're allowed to kill a cat. So what's interesting? So now apparently cats are added to the list of animals that pose a danger as well. So therefore, Rav asking not to kill a cat. V'asur l'kaimo, and you are not permitted to have a cat. Okay. Right, so I have something new to go off on. Right, so now let's say, so now you're not allowed to have a cat either. Again, we'll say we're going to see the halacha with all of these things. Ve'ein bo mishum gezel, and ultimately, again, there's no theft when it comes to a cat. Right, no theft when it comes to a cat. So we'll say ve'ein bo mishum hashev avei de l'baylim. And we'll say if a cat is lost, and someone puts the picture on the telephone pole, and you find it, there is no mitzvah of hashavas haved of returning the cat to the owner. Okay, the cheven the amrit murta lahargo ma'ini husu asur lekaimo. We'll say now, the truth is, once you go ahead and you say that you're permitted to kill the cat, right? Once you're permitted to do that, then halacha l'maisa. Why does it have to say that halacha l'maisa you're not permitted to go ahead and maintain it? As we'll say, if you're allowed to kill it, you're certainly not allowed to maintain it. So Ma'av Temodra thought murta lahargo isur leka. So you might have thought like this: you're allowed to kill it, but maybe there's no isser in maintaining a cat. Kamash malon. Not so. But it's like Kamash Malon that you're not allowed to even have a cat at all. So the Gemara says, Amri v'cheivan, the Amrit Eimba Mishum Gezel, Maini Usu Eimba Mishum Hashev Avei de L'Bailim. But say furthermore, after you said that Halacha L'Maisa, there's no issue of theft. In other words, there's no theft when it comes to a cat. You can steal the cat, no issue of theft. Then why does it have to say that you're not obligated to return it ultimately again to the owner? Amravina the oro. We'll say for its skin. In other words, you might have thought maybe once the cat is dead, you're obligated to return the cat hide, right? The cat's skin. ultimately to its owner. Kamashlo, no, but it's no obligation to return that as well. All right, so Moshe, so apparently now Rav darshan this based on this episode where he saw the cat bite off the hand of the child. The Gemara said, Meisvei, Rabbi Shmuel Silber Omer, Rabbi Shmuel Silber says, Megadlin, Kalavim, Kufrin, Vichatulin, Vikofrin, Vichudos, and Neshama, Nakar Sabayis. But we just saw on Amud Aleph, that's what? That you're allowed to raise cats. Right? Why are you allowed to raise cats? Cats can actually be very helpful. Why? They catch mice. Right? So a cat could be incredibly helpful like that. Lokashia, haba uchma, haba chiyura. But say apparently, again, it depends on the type of cat. So apparently black cats are good, white cats are harmful. Very interesting. So the Gemara says, Vaha maisa derav uchma hava. But Rav's, the story of Rav, where the cat bit off the hand of the child, that was a black cat. So you see, black cats are problematic as well. No. Hasam ochma bar chiyurahu. No, it was from a bad family. Right? In other words, it was a black cat from a white family. So the Gemara says, okay, now. Let's say, come on. All right, so I say, so nice again. So right, it was a black cat from a white family. So the Gemara says, Vaha mi baya baya. So the Gemara says, it's interesting, but I just want to point out also. Remember also we had cats before. Remember again, the big sugi of cats was by brachas. Right? I will say again, there was talking about if you want to see shadim. Remember again, there's the whole story with Ashmedai taking the black cat, the son of a black cat, right? Grinding it up, putting the stuff in your eyes, you're able to see shadim. Okay. So the Gemara spoke about over here. So the Gemara says, so with the black cat, good, white cat, bad. Right? The Gemara says, what about the black cat that bit off the hand of the baby? It was the black cat from the white cat family. Okay, so the Gemara says, "Vaha mi boy bayile ravina." So we'll say first white line. The Gemara says, "The boy ravina uchma bar chiyura mal." So the Gemara really gets into this. What happens if you have the black cat, the son of a white cat? What's the halacha? So kikani bayile ravina bo uchma bar chiyura bar uchma. So this Ravina's kasha was with a black cat, the son of a white cat, the son of a black cat. Right? However, Ma'aseh Bo'ochmar Bar Chiyura Haba. The episode with Rav Rabbosai was the black cat, the son of a white cat, the son of a white cat. So apparently, again, that black cat was more like the familial aberration, and therefore really it had the status of a white cat, because it came from generations of white cat ancestors, and that's why, again, it was a bit more vicious. Okay. So Amr Rav Acha bar Papa, Mishum Rabbi Abba bar Papa, Mishum Rav Ada bar Papa. Formerly Amr Rav Abba bar Papa, Mishum Rabbi Chia bar Papa, Mishum Rabbi Acha bar Papa. Formerly Amr Rabbi Abba bar Papa, Mishum Rabbi Acha bar Papa, Mishum Rabbi Chanina bar Papa. Someone said, right? So the Gemara said, Masriyan ala chichoch b'Shabbos. So we'll say there's actually some interesting cases over here. Let's say, by the way, I do have to give a little bit of a shout out to our Chabad brethren, because in the mnemonic, in the parentheses over here, if you notice again, the first of it is Chabad, right? Which again, all right, it's already Yud Aleph Shvat. We passed Yud Shvat, but still, again, Lamaisa, to get a good Chabad reference on the heels of Yud Aleph is also beautiful. So the Gemara goes right. The Gemara says as follows. So the Gemara says, Masrin ala chichoch b'Shabbos. So now listen to this. So literally it means you could call out ala chichoch. Now look at Rashi. Masrin b'tzibor or b'tchina or b'shofros or b'chatzotzros. So I will say the concept of calling out means that when there is a time of distress, ultimately again we call out b'tzibor. And what do we call out with? We call out with again tchina is supplications, a shofar, trumpets. So you're allowed to go ahead and call out on Shabbos ala chichoch. Rashi says over here, chichoch, shchin, shemischachecha adam ala. So we'll say an outbreak of boils. If there's an outbreak of boils, shchin, right? That's how we translate shchin, as boils. Right? Yeah. Right? Outbreak of boils. Ultimately, again, so we'll say if this happens on Shabbos, you sound the trumpets, you sound the shofros, and you convene a public prayer assembly. V'delas hanin eles lo b'mehera tifatach. We're saying, what a line. What a line. Even before we know what it means. The door that closes cannot easily be reopened. The door that closes cannot easily be reopened. I was saying, it's worth it to learn a whole shas just to see a line like that. I will say every single day there are beautiful doors of opportunity open before us. And so often in life we are just simply, quote unquote, too busy to take advantage of them, thinking that it's okay. When we get around to it, those doors of opportunity will still be open. And what we learn, especially as we get older in life, is that very often those doors of opportunity close. They close. And I will say, when they close, v'delas hanin elas, when the door of opportunity closes, lo b'mehera tifatach. It's sometimes you can reopen them, but even if you can reopen them, they're very difficult to reopen, and more often than not, you can never really reopen them altogether. Incredible. So there's a number of different statements over here. If you purchase land in Eretz Yisrael, kosfin alav onu afilu b'Shabbos. You can write a document, or a legal document for it even on Shabbos. So we'll say we saw this in Maseches Gid. So we'll say three halachas over here. Number one, if there's an outbreak of boils, you convene a public prayer assembly with shofar, with trumpets, all on Shabbos. Number two, when the door of opportunity closes, ultimately again, it's not easily reopened. And number three, if you're purchasing real estate in Eretz Yisrael, you could even draw up the contract on Shabbos. We'll define all of these things. The Gemara says, Meisvei, Ushar Paronios HaMisrakshos Ubos Alat Tzibor Kigon Chichuch Chagov Zuvuv Tzira Yitush Shiloach Nechashim Vakravim Lo Hayu Masriim Elatzoakim. Yet Rabbi said the Brisa says as follows: that when all other misfortunes come upon the tzibur, right, whether it's chichoch, boils, chagav, right, grasshoppers, zvuv, bugs, tzira, hornets, yitush, gnats, snakes, scorpions, so these are all major things. If it happens on Shabbos, you do not convene a public assembly, you do not blow shofar, you do not blow trumpets, rather you do tzoakim. What does tzoakim mean? Everyone davens on their own. Right? Everyone davens on their own. It's not a mass assembly. So you see that for boils, you don't go ahead and convene a public assembly. Lokashya, kan balach, kan biyavish. We'll say it depends on the type of boil. One is talking about a moist boil, and one is talking about, again, a dry boil. The Amar Rabbi Shmuel ben Levi, shchin, shehevi HaKadosh Baruch Hu ala mitzrim. Incredible, we'll say. Right? The shchin, the boils that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought on the mitzrim, what was unique about them? Lach mi bachutz, they were moist on the outside, v'yavesh mi bifnim, and they were dry on the inside. Shneimar, v'yish shchin abu ba'os, porech ba'adam, uba behema. So we'll say, incredible. So incredible, we'll say, Saloch al-Maisa, the Gemara says it depends on the type. Only if it's the more severe type of boil, do you go ahead and convene a public display on Shabbos. Otherwise, people daven, but they don't gather publicly. Incredible. V'delas hanin eles lo b'mehera tivatach. We'll say, what does this mean? That the closed door cannot easily be reopened. What is that referring to? Gemara says, Mahi Marzutra Amar Smicha. Marzutra said refers to Smicha. We'll say, Smicha, remember, means appointment to a position of leadership. So we'll say it's incredible. So what the Gemara is essentially saying is like this. The Gemara is saying is like this, that halacha l'maisa, if a person was supposed to rise to a level of prominence and leadership, and for some reason that door closed, they got passed over it, for let's say for some argument's sake, it's very difficult to reclaim that standing. Right? Kind of once that opportunity has passed by, it's very difficult ultimately again to pry that door open again. Really interesting. Ravashi says, Kol amariyan lo b'mehera mativan lo. So I will say another really interesting idea over here. Literally, again, I will say, so literally translated, it means, once a person suffers a reversal of fortune, right? In other words, once a person is kind of like in a bad place, it's kind of hard sometimes to turn your luck around. Let's say it's a fascinating statement. Kol amariyan lo. So we'll say any person who is really again is suffering through bad times, ultimately lo b'mehira metivan lo. His situation often doesn't turn around quickly. Now again, it doesn't say it doesn't turn around. Rather, I will say, what does it mean? It doesn't turn around quickly. Lo b'mehira metivan lo. Rav Acha Midifti Amr the Olam Ein Mativan Lo. Rav Acha Midifti says it never turns around. Not good. V'lohi Rav Acha Midifti Milsa de Nafshi Hu da Amar. And I will say the Gemara says that's not true. Rav Acha Midifti was just talking about his own life circumstances. And I will say, how do you understand the Gemara like that? Right, which is such. If you think about it, it is such a depressing Gemara. Right, if you're encountering difficult times, so the Gemara says lo mehira mativan lo. Ultimately, things are not going to turn around quickly, right? Or things are not going to turn around at all. So we'll say perhaps what the Gemara is trying to highlight to us is like this, or Rashi is trying to highlight to us. What we'll say is that sometimes when we go through difficult times in life, it is important to recognize that things will get better, but it's probably going to take time. Sometimes we're so often when all of us encounter difficult circumstances, and what we want more than anything is like an immediate reversal. And when that immediate change doesn't occur, it exacerbates and amplifies our pain. So sometimes the best way to deal with difficult circumstances is to readjust your expectations. Is to say, I'm in a hard spot right now. I'm in a difficult spot. And you know what? It's quite possible that I'm going to be here for a while. If you accept that, if you change that, then suddenly, again, you adjust your perspective a little bit. You're much better equipped to deal with what life is throwing your way. And that I think, is what Ravashi is saying. Lo. If you're undergoing difficult times, the best thing you could do is kind of say, okay, you know what? I may live in this space for a little bit of time. It may be lo b'mehera mativan lo. Things are not going to turn around quickly. But I will say, but what? They will turn around. They will turn around. Just, it's going to take time. If you adopt that position in life, then you're able to navigate almost every complex life situation. Conversely, if in the midst of difficult times you need a resolution, and you need a resolution now, very often that's a frustrating place to be. Because I will say, in the complex situations in life, there's often not an immediate resolution. Things take time. So if you accept Kol Marian Lo, if you just whisper to yourself, Lo b'mehira mativan lo, things will get better. There'll be a light at the end of the tunnel. Somehow things will resolve. It just won't happen b'mehira. That gives you the staying power to work through any life challenge. Otherwise, we'll stop over here for today. Wow. What a daf. And it's only Sunday. Shkayach Avosai.